Today we are from group 2. We're going to present about the qualitative research data collection from chapter 9. Our group consists of Alisa, Novalia, Sabrina, and Shantira. Next. We're going to explain about 4 table of contents. The first one is data collection procedures. The second one is data recording procedures, and number 3 is data analysis and interpretation, and the last one is writing the qualitative report. The first one is the data collection procedures. In here, we're going to describing methods set by the researchers to collect the research information. Next. The key points of the qualitative data collection is first, the researchers have to identify the subject for the proposed study. So here there are purposefully selected sites or participants that will help the researchers understand the problem and research question. As identified by Miles and Haberman, the research should selected for the first one is the setting where the research will take place, the actors who will observed or interviewed, the events, what the actors will be observed or interviewed doing, and the last one is the process, or it is also can describe as the evolving nature of events undertaken by the actors within the setting. Next. After identifying the selected sites and individual, we also have to determine the size or numbers of sites or participants involved in the study. So in here, sample size depends on the qualitative design being used. For example, there are, for example, the first one in narrative research, it is usually include 1 or 2 individuals. The phenomenology range from 3 to 10 individuals. Grounded theory from 20 to 30, and the last one is case study that include about 4 or 5 cases. Next. And the third one is we have to identify the type of data to be collected. In many qualitative studies, inquirers collect multiple forms of data and spend considerable time in the natural setting gathering information. The method in collecting the research are divided into 4: the qualitative observation, qualitative interviews, qualitative document, and the last one is qualitative audio and visual materials. 4 of these will be explained in the in this first section. Next. So as we know, there are 4 data collection types. The first one is observation. Observation is researchers take felt noted on the behavior and activities of individuals at the research site. And in qualitative interviews, the research conduct face-to-face interviews with participants, telephone interviews, or engage in focus group interviews with 6 to 8 interviews in each group. And the next one is the documents. Documents is the so during the process of the research, the investigator may collect the qualitative document. This may be the public documents such as newspaper, minutes of meetings, official report, or private documents such as diaries, letters, and emails. And the last one is the audiovisual materials. This is the data that take form of photograph, art objects, videotapes, website main page, emails, text message, and social media, or any forms of sound. Next. So they will discuss deeper about that for data collection types. The first one is we're going to discuss about the observation. As I mentioned, observation is when the researchers take felt note on the behavior and activities of individual on the research site. So option within, because in the observation, the research records in an unstructured or semi-structured way. The options within the types is that the first one, the researchers have to complete participant, researcher, conceals role. The second one is observer as a participant, role of researcher is known. The third one, participant as observer, observation role secondary to participant role. And the last one is complete observer, or researchers observe without participating. The advantage of using this observation is that researcher has a first-hand experience with the participant of his or her research. Researchers can also record information as it occurs, and unusual aspects can be noticed during observation. And the last advantage is useful. The observation is useful in exploring topics that may be uncomfortable for participants to discuss. However, there are also limitations such as the researcher may be seen as intrusive. Private information may be observed that researcher cannot report. Researchers may not have good attending and observing skills. And the last one is certain participants, for example, children may present special problems in gaining the report. Next one is the interviews. The option within the types is that interviews can be conducted face-to-face on one person or in one in-person interview. And it can also conduct through telephone, researchers interviews by phone, focus group or researcher interviews participant in a group, and email internet interview. The advantage of the type is that interviews are useful when participant cannot be directly observed. Participant can provide historical information, and also it allows researchers control over the line of questioning. And the limitation itself is that interviews provides indirect information filtered through the views of interviewees. And the second one is provides information in a designated place rather than the natural fact setting. The researcher's presence may bias response. And the last one is not all people are equally articulate and perceptive. Next. The next one is document. The option within the types. There are there are two options within these types. The first one is public document, and the second one is private document. The public document is minutes of meetings or newspaper, while the private documents sometimes can be conducted through journal, diaries, or letters. So there are 5 advantages of using the documents collection method. The first one is enables researchers to obtain the language and words of participants, and the second one can be accessed at at a time convenient to researcher and an unobstructive source of information. The fourth one is represent data to which participant had given attention. And the last one is as written evidence. It saved a researcher the time and expense of transcribing. And for the limitation of the type itself, the first one is not all people are equally articulate and perceptive. And the second one is that may be protected information unavailable to public or private access. The next one is document requires the researchers to search out the information in hard to find places, requires transcribing or optically scanning for computer entry. Materials may be incomplete, and the fourth one is the document may not be authentic or accurate. And the last one is audiovisual materials. The option within the types is the photographs, videotapes, art object, computer message, sound, and film. The advantage is that the audiovisual materials may be an obstructive method of selecting data, provides an opportunity for participants to directly share their reality. It is creative in that it captures attention visually, but the limitation itself is that it may be difficult to interpret and may not be accessible publicly or privately. And the last one is the presence of an observer, for example, photographer, may be disruptive and affect responses. So after we learn about this 4 methods, we will going deeper in explaining the approach of this method.
Yep. So these are the qualitative data approaches. First, we will be talking about observation. So there are different approaches that a researcher can take when they do observation data collection type. They can gather field notes by conducting an observation as a participant, as an observer, or spending more time as a participant than as an observer, or the other way around. And they can also observe as a participant outsider, and then moving into the setting as observing as participant insider. And secondly, for the interviews, the approaches that a researcher can take is they can conduct an unstructured, open-ended interview and take interview notes, or they can audio tape the interview and then transcribe it later. And they can also conduct a semi-structured interview, audio tape the interview, and transcribe the interview. Next, they can conduct a focus group interview, audio tape it, and then transcribe it. And lastly, they can conduct different types of interviews through email or internet, face-to-face, or focus group. Next will be the approaches to the document data collection type. The researcher can approach this type by keeping a journal during the research study, collect personal letters from participants, analyzing the public documents such as official memos, minutes, records, or archival material, examine autobiographies and biographies, conduct chart audits, and review medical records. And lastly, for the audiovisual materials, they can approach this type of data collection by examining photographs, videotapes, physical trace evidence, websites. They can collect sounds, emails, discussion board messages, or other forms of social media messages. They can collect cell phone text messages, examine possessions or ritual objects, and they can collect sound, smells, tastes, or any stimuli of the senses. Next, we will be moving on to data recording procedures. So before the qualitative researcher starts, there should be a plan as to how the data will be recorded. Next. So these are the two important protocols that needs to be planned and developed before the qualitative researcher conducts their interview. First is the observational protocol, and second is the interview protocol. For the observational, next. So for the observational protocol, it is basically how to record the observations as the interview or the focus group discussion is taking place. So the researcher can do this by taking descriptive notes of the participants' portraits, dialogue, or physical setting. They can also take reflective notes, which is the researcher's own personal thoughts, speculations, or impressions. And they can also observe the demographic information of the interview, which is the time, place, and date. Next. And for the interview protocol, this includes the handwritten notes that the researcher has, audio taping or video taping to record the entire interview. And it is recommended that researchers take notes in the event that the recording equipment fails. Next. So here are the components of the interview protocol. If the interviewer is planning to make handwritten notes. So first, they should record the heading, which is the date, place, interviewer, and interviewee. They should also take note of the instructions, which is the standard operating procedures that are used from one interview to another. And they also need to include the questions. It can be either the icebreaker question in the beginning of the interview or the subsequent research questions that they will have in the actual research. And next, they will have the probes, which is follow-up questions that will make the participant more engaged and more elaborate on what they say. And they should also keep spaces between the questions and between one question and another to record their responses. They should also take note of the thank you statement to acknowledge the time the interviewee spent during the interview. And lastly, they should keep a log to record the documents and collect any primary material or secondary material of the interview that can be used as an analysis later on.
Okay, my name is Shantira and I will proceed to the next following slides. And the third part of this material is regarding data analysis and interpretation. Next slide, please. So the discussion and the proposal about qualitative data analysis might begin with several general points about the overall process. Data analysis and qualitative research will proceed hand in hand with other parts of developing the qualitative study, namely the data collection and the write-up of findings. While interviews are going on, for example, researcher may be analyzing an interview collected earlier, writing memos that may ultimately be included as a narrative in the final report, and organizing the structure of the final report. This process is unlike quantitative research, in which the investigator collects the data, then analyzes information, and then finally writes the report. Because this text and image data are so dense and rich, not all of the information can be used in qualitative study. Thus, in the analysis of the data, researchers need to winnow the data, or a process of focusing in some of the data and disregarding other parts of it. In qualitative research, the impact of this process is to aggregate data into small numbers of themes, sometimes like 5 to 7 themes. Also, specify whether you will use qualitative computer data analysis program to assist you in analyzing the data, or whether you will hand code the data. Hand coding is a laborious and time-consuming process, even for the data from a few individuals. Thus, qualitative software programs have become quite popular, and they help researchers organize, sort, and search for information in text or image databases. Next slide. So continuing the previous material, here are the rest of general points about the overall processes. A helpful conceptualization to advance in the method section is that qualitative data analysis will proceed onto two levels. The first is a more general procedure in analyzing the data, and the second would be the analysis steps embedded within specific qualitative designs. For example, narrative research employs restoring the participant stories using structural devices, such as plot, setting, activities, climax, and announcement. A complete description of the data analysis in a proposal, when the inquirer is using one of these strategies, would be to first describe the general process of analysis, followed by the specific steps within the strategy. And despite these analytic differences depending on the types of strategy used, the qualitative inquiries often use as a general procedure and convey in the proposal the steps in data analysis. An ideal situation is to blend the general steps with the specific research strategy steps. Next slide, please. An overview of the data analysis process can be seen in this figure. It is suggested that we advance these 7 steps in the method section of our proposal and give concrete illustrations of potential codes and themes that might emerge in our study. In order for us to have a better understanding of these steps, I will briefly explain each steps for data analysis in the next following slides. So for the first step, we organize and prepare the data for analysis. This involves transcribing interviews, optically scanning material, typing up field notes, cataloging all of the visual materials, and also sorting and arranging the data into different types depending on the source of information. And the second one, read or look at all the data. This first steps provides a general sense of the information and an opportunity to reflect on its overall meaning. What general ideas are participants saying? What is the tone of the ideas? What is the impression of the overall depth, credibility, and the use of information? Sometimes qualitative researchers write notes in margins of transcripts or start recording general thoughts about the data at this stage. For visual data, a sketchbook of ideas begin to take shape. And the third step is to start coding all of the data. Next slide, please. So coding is a process of organizing the data by bracketing chunks and writing a word representing a category in the margins. It involves taking text data or pictures gathered during data collection, segmenting sentences or paragraph or image into categories. Also labeling those categories with a term, and often a term based in actual language of the participant is called the in vivo term. And as shown below, here are the 8 steps typically used in forming codes. Next slide, please. In addition, we give some attention to the types of codes to develop when analyzing a text transcript or a picture. And according to the Creswell textbook, codes falls into these 3 categories. The first one, codes on topic that readers would expect to find based on the past literature and common sense. For example, when we studying bullying in the schools, I might code some segments as attitude toward oneself. And this code would be expected in a study about bullying in schools. The second one, codes that are surprising and that were not anticipated at the beginning of the study. And the last one, the codes that are unusual and that are in and of themselves of conceptual interest to readers. Next slide, please. And here are the rest of the steps in the data analysis. For the fourth step, we use the coding process to generate a description of the setting or people, as well as the categories or themes for analysis. The description involves a detailed rendering of information about people, places, or events in the setting. Researchers can generate codes for this description. This analysis is useful in designing detailed descriptions for case studies, ethnographies, and narrative research projects. To this fifth step, the advance how this description and themes will be represented in a qualitative narrative. And the most popular approach is to use a narrative passage to convey the findings of the analysis. A final step in the data analysis involves making an interpretation and qualitative research of the findings or result by asking, what were the lessons learned? Captured the essence of this idea. These lessons could be the researcher's personal interpretation, couched in the understanding that the inquirer brings to the study from a personal culture, history, and experiences. It could also be meaning derived from a comparison of the findings with information gleaned from the literature or theories. Next slide, please.
My name is Shabrina, and now I'm going to continue the presentation. I'm going to talk about writing the qualitative report. So, a plan for a qualitative method should end with some comments about the narrative that will emerge from the data analysis. So, in a plan for a study, researchers should consider advancing several points about the narrative. These, these several points include the qualitative strategy of inquiry, how the sections will be presented, and the last one is the writing strategies. In the next slide, I will explain further about these 3 considerations. So the first consideration that researchers should consider is the qualitative strategy of inquiry. The basic procedure in reporting the result of a qualitative study are to develop descriptions and themes from the data, to present these descriptions and themes that convey multiple perspectives from participants and detailed descriptions of the setting or individual. Using a qualitative strategy of inquiry, these results may also provide a chronological narrative of an individual's life or the narrative research. Then the second one, a detailed description of their experiences or phenomenology. Then the third one is theory generated from the data or the grounded theory. Then the fourth one is a detailed portrait of a culture sharing group or the ethnography. And the last one is in-depth analysis of one or more cases or the case study. Then the second consideration is how the sections will be represented. Given these different strategies, the findings and interpretation sections of a plan for a study might discuss how the sections will be presented. whether it is as an objective account, a chronology, a process model, fieldwork experiences based on the Van Manen in 1988, and an extended story, an analysis by cases or across cases, or a detailed descriptive portrait. Then the last or the third consideration is the writing strategies. At the specific level, there might be some comment in the proposal about writing strategies that will be used to convey the qualitative research. This might include the following. The first one is quotes, whether it is from short to long embedded passages. Then the second one is dialogue that reflects the culture of participants, their language, and the sensitivity to their culture or ethnicity, and the interweaving of words from participants and the author's interpretation. Then the third one is varied narrative forms such as matrices, comparison tables, and diagrams. Then the next one is the first person, whether I or collective we pronounce in the narration. Then the next one is metaphors and analogies. You can see the example is in the Richardson in 1990. And the last one is narrative forms associated with specific qualitative strategies, such as the description in case studies and ethnographies, or a detailed story in narrative research. Then the next one, I'm going to continue the presentation with showing you an example of a complete qualitative method section. So the following is an example of a complete qualitative method section that was included in a proposal by Miller in 1992. Miller is an anthropologist, and this section, it contains most of the topics for a good qualitative method section addressed in this chapter. Before we start, I would like to give you an overview about Miller's project. It was an ethnographic study of first-year experiences of the president of a four-year college. So for the qualitative procedures, in total, there are 10 procedures. The first one is the qualitative research paradigm, and the second one is the ethnographic research design. The third one is the researcher's role, and the fourth one is the bounding the study. The next one, we have ethical consideration, data collection strategies, and then data analysis procedures, verification, and the last one is reporting the findings. Next, I'm going to explain further each of these qualitative procedures. So the first one is the qualitative research paradigm. The following is a few sentences of commonly articulated assumptions regarding characteristics presented by various researchers. So the first one, qualitative research occurs in natural settings where human behavior and event occurs. Then the second one, qualitative research is based on assumptions that are very different from quantitative designs. Theory or hypotheses are not established a priori. Then the third one, the researcher is the primary instrument in data collection rather than some inanimate mechanism. This assumption is based on the Eisner 1991, Franklin and Wallen 1990, Lincoln and Guba 1985, and Merriam 1988. Then the last one that I'm going to explain is the ideographic interpretation is utilized. In other words, attention is paid to particulars, and data is interpreted in regard to the particulars of a case rather than generalizations. There are actually 10 assumptions, which you can see in the book, but now I'm just going to explain this four. Then the next one of the qualitative procedures, there are the ethnographic design. So this study will utilize the ethnographic research tradition. The ethnographic study includes in-depth interviewing and continual and ongoing participant observation of a situation, according to Jacob 1987. And in attempting to capture the whole picture reveals how people describe and structure their world, according to Frankel and Wallen in 1990. Then the third step is the researcher's role. Particularly in quantitative research, the role of researcher as the primary data collection instrument necessitates the identification of personal values, assumptions, and biases study. Then the fourth one, we have the bounding the study. So there are four bounds of the study, which is the setting, actors, events, and processes. Then the fifth one, we have ethical consideration. So the following safeguards will be employed to protect the informant's rights, which are the researcher's objectives will be articulated verbally and in writing, written permission to proceed, and then we have a research exemption form will be filled, and then the informant will be informed of all data collection, and then verbatim transcriptions and written interpretations and reports will be available to informant, and the informant's rights, interests, and wishes will be considered first. And the last one is the final decisions regarding the informant. Anonymity will rest with the informant. Then the sixth one is the data collection strategies, which the data will be collected from February through May in 1992. And then the next one is data analysis procedures. So according to Merriam and Marshall and Rossman, contend that data collection and data analysis must be a simultaneous process in qualitative research. Then the next one is verification. In ensuring internal validity, the following strategies will be employed. The first one is the triangulation of data, which data will be collected through multiple sources to include interviews, observation, document analysis. And then the second one is member checking. The informant will serve as a check throughout the analysis process. Then the third one is long-term and repeated observations at the research site. Then the fourth one is peer examination. The fifth one is participatory modes of research. And the sixth one or the last one is clarification of researcher bias. Then the last step or the ninth one is reporting the findings. So according to Loveland, he suggests that although data collection and analysis strategies are similar across qualitative methods, the way the findings are reported is diverse. So that's it from our group. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Any feedback or questions are welcome. Thank you.